In this video, I'll tell you about 3 different mechanics that pop up in many different wargames rules these days, and I wish they didn't. I like to talk about wargaming rule sets on this channel from time to time, and it's for several different reasons. Number one, the rules are how you play the game. It's not the lore, it's not the art, it's not even like the models or the terrain, it's the rules that drive the experience of the gameplay. You may be really into the intellectual property of a certain game franchise. I kind of referred to it as vibes in a relatively recent video, Pachow. But if you're going to be playing the game, for that IP, whether it's the attached rule set for that game or you're going to decide to move the lore, that you like over to a different rule set that you like more, either way, rules are super important. Secondly, I've been designing miniature games with my good friend Vince Venturella for the last 3 years now. He does the majority of the rules design, of course, and the writing and whatnot, but we meet weekly and he bounces, the new systems and rules that he's designed off of me, and then, to get my feedback and stuff. And then I do the same with the art and the layout and the visuals, which is kind of my area, right? I bounce that stuff off of him. It's because we're collaborative. But with all of the games that we've designed in the last 3 years, it's kept gaming rules and what I like and don't like pretty front and center in my mind. So I want to tell you about some things, some mechanics and stuff like that I don't personally like to see in wargaming miniatures design. Again, my opinion, right? Some of them are newer things that you start to see, and some of them have been around for like a long time, probably too long in my opinion. However, I'm not doing this to call out specific companies or designers or anything like that. I'm doing it to help you maybe realize what it is about certain rule sets that bug or annoy you. I want you to kind of start a discussion in your own mind, or maybe even, in your gaming group, about what you like and dislike in wargaming rules. My hope is to help you start to find games that you enjoy playing. All right, so the first thing that I don't enjoy in wargames, custom dice. Now, I don't mean like fancy six-siders with like a cool logo printed on the six or whatever, because honestly, I have custom Tabletop Minions D6s that I'll start selling eventually online, through the website and whatnot. I've been selling them at local conventions and things like that around here for years. So it's not that. Those are fine, if you're into that kind of thing. When I say custom dice, I mean dice with specific symbols designed only for use with a specific game, right? They've got special symbols on there and all that kind of stuff, and they're designed just for this particular game. Think Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Shatterpoint, Marvel Crisis Protocol. Man, like Atomic Mass and Asmodee love that custom dice life, evidently. And, but there's certainly plenty others as well. The excuse that I hear for making custom dice for your war game is that it gives the designer, far more outcomes and resolution possibilities than just using regular like six-sided dice or whatever. This can sort of be true, right? Usually regular dice only give you kind of simple outcomes. You need to roll a 3 up, which is to say 3 or higher, or 4 up, which is 4 or higher, or whatever. But there's a lot that you can do with standard dice as you roll just like a few more of those dice. If you even just throw 2d6, right? The 2d6 gives you this really interesting bell curve in the results that can really sort of expand on the way that the rules can show and utilize randomness. Here's an example of not needing custom dice, right? There was this game called Wrath of Kings that I really enjoyed years ago. It was made by Cool Mini or Not, who loves to make miniatures games and then cancel them. As far as I can tell, that really is part of the business model. I'm not sure how that all works. But anyway, they made really cool models. It was a really cool game, had cool lore, all that kind of stuff, and then they canceled it. Anyway, in Wrath of Kings, every single unit that you'd have in the game, no matter what it was, a hero unit, a regular unit, whatever, They all had this little kind of bar next to them, like in the book and stuff like that, and it was a 1 through 10 bar. So you would take a D10, a 10-sided die, and you would throw it, and then it would give you a number, a 4, let's say, for an example. And then you would look for that creature, and you'd see the little bar next to them, and you'd look at the 4, and next to the 4 there would be a little symbol, and that symbol would maybe mean miss or hit or crit or like lots of different possible states and things like that. The trick is that every single creature, unit, whatever in that game had a different little bar next to it. So they could very easily make it so that, well, this creature rarely ever hits. So they're all misses until you get to the 6. But then when it does hit, it does tons of damage. Or maybe this particular model hits a lot but never crits or whatever. And then in that situation, using a normal 10-sided die, you can get a lot more possible outcomes for all the different units than making these like specific custom fancy schmancy dice that a person has to buy extra if they lose them and all that kind of stuff. It just makes more sense if you want to have that kind of granularity and change things up so much to put it on the card or on the page or whatever, as opposed to putting it on the dice. Generally, I believe that companies want to use custom dice for their games because then it's just another thing that you have to buy from them. Say what you will about Games Workshop's overpriced fancy schmancy, D6s. They're not required to play the games. They're just nice to haves, and you can take them or leave them. You can also use white D6s that you pull out of old Yahtzee games that you pick up at the thrift store too if you want. GW don't care. But try and play like Fallout Wasteland Warfare without their crazy custom like weird D12s. That's a problem. The next thing that I don't really like to see in Wargames rules, IGOUGO activation, which is basically the way that Warhammer 40K does it. If you don't know what it was called, it's called IGOUGO. What it means is that when it's your turn, you move your entire army, right? Then you shoot with your entire army. You charge and fight, pretty much with your entire army, who's ever within hand-to-hand combat range and all that kind of stuff. And the only thing that your opponent does during most of your turn is, roll some armor saves and maybe generally a little bit of hand-to-hand combat if they're already engaged with an enemy. Then, once you are finally done, then it's your opponent's turn to play, and then you just sit there. The turns alternate like this, like I go and then you go, hence the name, until the game is over. That's it. And I find it pretty boring. At least in Age of Sigmar, you roll to see who goes first every turn, and not just at the beginning of the game only once, right? Therefore, in Age of Sigmar, you could have a player who goes at the end of, let's say, turn 2, and then goes again right away at the beginning of turn 3. And both players kind of have to plan for that possibility. In 40K, the order is picked at the very beginning and doesn't really change at all during the game. But there are tons of other, and I would say more interesting, activation systems out there for tabletop war games. Heck, even, Legions Imperialis, which is also from Games Workshop, uses a better activation system than most of the rest of their bigger kind of army games. In this game, in Legions, it's alternating activation, but it's phased. So it's the movement phase. I move a unit, you move a unit, I move a unit. We go back and forth like that. And then when it's like shooting, then I shoot with a unit, and then you shoot with a unit, and then we get to combat. So it's alternating, but it's still this happens in this phase, and this happens in this phase, and that kind of stuff, right? And then there are other games out there that use alternating unit activations where you pick a unit and then you do all of the stuff that they can do, moving, attacking, all the other special actions maybe that they have available to them, and then your opponent does the same with one of their units. But activation can be based off of stats, like in Star Wars X-Wing, or by pulling a die randomly from a bag, like in Bolt Action. There's tons of options. Why does it matter? Well, because the rules are making the story happen in your games as you play them. In Bolt Action, as I mentioned, there's a serious fog of war going on. It's World War II, and there's explosions and smoke in the air, and you don't know what's going to happen next. Hence why you pick a die, either in your color or your opponent's color, randomly out of the bag to see who goes next. In IGOUGO, it's more of a foregone conclusion. But war doesn't happen in an orderly fashion, you know? Also, IGOUGO makes it really boring for the person whose turn it isn't, so there's that too. And the last rules mechanic that I could do without, bad list customization. The worst offender amongst the games that I know is the 2021 version of Kill Team. I loved Kill Team 2018 because you could really build the type of list that you wanted to for your force. Now, sure, you couldn't use every model available in a faction from Warhammer 40K, right? You couldn't be I'm going to put in a Land Raider. But you could use a lot of the foot troops, especially when they released the Elites add-on kind of later on, 2019, I think. Then along came the new version of Kill Team in 2021, and then your force could only field between 1 and 2 types of units, and only certain numbers. In most games, you're given a bunch of different types of units to choose from, and then those units, or maybe models, if it's a skirmish game instead of an army game, they all have a certain value, or they have points or something like that, and then you have a fixed number of points to spend on your force. And then you just do the math. Sometimes there are other requirements for the force as well, besides just the maximum amount of points. Maybe you have to include a leader character, or maybe you can only field a certain number of a specific unit so you don't spam too many of them, or whatever. But you as the player have a certain amount of agency over your own force, and that's important to making them feel like your own force. In the new version of Kill Team 2021, if you use the compendium specifically, then you can usually only take 2 fire teams, and that means only 2 different types of units. Now, it could be 2 of the same unit, which would be even kind of worse, or you can use 2 different types of units. That's mainly the long and short of it, pretty much. You might get to tweak some weapon choices on the units, but not too much, I don't think. My old favorite Necron Kill Team was a combination of Immortals, Warriors, a single Death Mark, and then some flayed ones that I had made myself because the new ones weren't out yet. There's no way to make that list, in the new version of Kill Team. Now, I know some of you are typing in the comments right now, but you like Combat Patrol and Spearhead, Uncle Adam, and there's no list building in those games. And you're right, but I look at those 2 different kind of games, as easy beginner forces to get a player into 40K and Age of Sigmar, respectively. That's what they were built to do. And a big problem that new players have is something called analysis paralysis when trying to build a new list. If you just give them the list up front, right, so that they don't have to worry about, well, how many of these should I take, and did I take enough of those, and do I have enough points, and all that kind of stuff, it just allows them to then focus on learning the game. Both of those formats, no matter what GW says, again, are designed to get you into the bigger games. So those are the 3 main things that I don't like to see in wargaming rule sets. There are plenty of runners-up, like really massive, giant, thick rule books with way too many rules, and also, games that require very specific models or terrain to play. But these 3 things that I just mentioned are the biggest red flags that generally keep me away from some war games these days. Do you agree with any of my choices? What do you think about them? Do you disagree? Do you have other choices that you don't like to see in wargaming rules these days? Let us all know down in the comments below. If you like videos like this, then it would be great if you'd hit the like button down there. It really helps out the channel. It helps out me. More people get to see this kind of video. If you'd like to see videos like this every single Friday, there's also a subscribe button down there that you can click on for free. Thanks for watching.